Hello, welcome to the ABCs of Behavior Training on Zoom. Your presenters today are Kathy Jennings and Julie Craig, NEISD Behavior Facilitators. Let's get started.
Okay, so in behavior, ABC stands for antecedent, behavior, and consequences of behavior. In this training, Julie and I will be talking a lot about the ABCs of behavior. In this slide, the antecedent, A, is what occurs right before the behavior. You may have asked a student to get out their journal or write their name on their paper. B is the behavior that you saw and how the student responded to it, and C, the consequence of what happened right after the behavior occurred.
Let's take a look at antecedents a little more closely. Antecedents are when we're trying to determine what event might be triggering a behavior. It might be the setting. Is the student engaged in a small group, a one-to-one session, or a large group? It could be the time, before school or afternoon. Location, classrooms, hallways, or libraries. It might even be the people involved, a particular teacher, peer, or bus driver. We can also look at those events that occur at the school during the day. This could be testing, a fire drill, picture day. It might even be in a directive given by another adult. A couple examples from a school setting might be a difficult or excessive task, where a student doesn't know how to engage in the activity, or maybe a denial of a desired item or activity. You might know a little bit about this when you tell a student that they can't use the iPad.
When we look at the behavior, it is important to understand that the behavior we are looking at must be defined in observable and measurable terms. By stating a student is misbehaving may not be viewed the same way by another. Behavior must be observable and measurable.
When we're trying to identify the problem behaviors, we're asking ourselves this question: what is the student doing or saying that is impeding the learning and disrupting the environment? Look at this list of problem behavior examples down below. Which of these examples are problem behaviors, defined as both measurable and observable? You're right. Screaming, cussing, hitting, kicking, and biting are all observable and measurable behaviors. What's wrong with using the terms bad attitude or lazy? Bad attitude and lazy are not observable and measurable. They are also subjective to the person that is observing or naming those behaviors.
Consequence, again, occurs right after the behavior, and it's how both the adult and the student responds to the behavior and what might be maintaining the behavior or causing it to occur in the future. Examples: attention in the form of stern looks or reprimands, removal of a difficult task, or even paying attention, getting that attention, whether it's positive or negative. If a student is getting negative, the payoff of the consequence behavior is getting attention every time from the adult, there's a good chance that you're going to see that behavior repeated again and again in the future.
I love this comic for consequences. They give you a lot of treats while they're training you, so play dumb for as long as you can. Clearly, this dog has figured out the consequences of their behavior.
So let's look at an ABC visual here. We see the antecedent that occurs before the behavior and the consequence that occurs after the behavior. Now, let's look at the two examples provided. When a task was assigned, the student shoved the materials off the desk and a verbal reprimand was given for the consequence. The second example describes the antecedent occurred in a group activity and a peer was hit, and the consequence was to send the student to the cool down area. We can clearly see what occurred before the behavior, what the behavior looked like, and the consequence of what occurred afterwards.
Here's an example of an ABC data collection document that is found on the NEISD Behavior Resource website. For each incident of behavior, the teacher fills out one row circling, or highlighting each choice. Notice the very small note section. This section should be used carefully, with only factual notes that give relevant information about the particular behavior incident. An example might be a surprise substitute teacher, missed speech session, or maybe the student was late to school and that impacted the behavior.
Now here's an example of an ABC data that was collected. Note that each incident recorded began with the start and end time, the context of what was happening, the time of the behavior, and so forth. Only one item should be circled per area. For the consequence, we may try multiple strategies to intervene with the behavior, but be mindful because we want to circle the last strategy that was implemented that successfully deterred the behavior, and then notate specifically what it referenced to.
Take a quick peek at this ABC data collected by a teacher. Do you notice any patterns? I really want you to look closely at the consequences of the behavior. Take a look. Did you notice that after the student engages in the problem behavior, there's a similar consequence in each instance? The student was receiving peer attention. This may start to paint the picture for you that the possible function of behavior could be attention seeking.
Let's look at this three-term contingency map. The three-term contingency map illustrates an example of consequences. For example, if the student chooses to sit and read for 5 minutes, the consequence is that they will receive iPad time. However, if the student chooses not to sit and read for 5 minutes, they will not receive iPad time. This shows the student that they have a choice for their consequence.
Now it's time to determine the function of the behavior. Or in simpler terms, ask yourself these questions. Why does the behavior occur? And what is the student trying to either gain or avoid?
So let's watch the video on functions of behavior explained by Marcus Perez.
It's important for me to really touch on the term function of behavior. As behavior occurs, it occurs for a reason. We generally are having a particular behavior to communicate or to gain access to a certain preferred item, or to get attention, or to get escape from something. An example I like to use quite a bit is when we're talking about when I have parents or when I have teachers or caregivers that come and ask, well, how do I keep my child or the individual, the consumer that I'm supporting, how do I keep them from having behaviors? Well, the first thing that I say to them is we have to identify what it is that the individual is trying to obtain or to get out of, and also look at the interventions that they're currently using, because the interventions that they're currently using may not be appropriate or may actually be reinforcing the inappropriate behavior, and that's what's great about applied behavior analysis, is we can identify those factors that really may be reinforcing the behavior when people think that it's not.
Look at this functions of behavior chart. This describes again the functions of behavior being to get or obtain, or to avoid and escape. What might a student be trying to get or obtain? This could be attention from peers and adults. Remember the student that was shouting out during the instructional lessons? They might also be trying to get or obtain a desired item, activity, or object, an iPad or goldfish. What about sensory input or feelings or sensations? This might be the student that's banging on their head or on the floor. They may also be trying to avoid or escape. This is unwanted attention from peers or adults. Do you know that student that when you speak with them, they put their head down and cover it with the hood of their jacket? They might also be trying to avoid or escape non-preferred items, objects, and activities and tasks. This might be that student that starts to engage in physical aggression when presented with a writing activity. They may also be trying to avoid or escape those unwanted sensory inputs, feelings, or sensations. Think about your student that hears loud noises in the cafeteria, and when they do, they elope from the cafeteria without permission.
So let's look at form versus function. The form of the behavior, or what the behavior looks and sounds like, is on the left. The function, what the behavior gets you, is on the right. The form of hitting may have multiple functions. One function may have multiple forms of behavior. Let's look, for example. We have 3 forms of hitting. So if we look at it, one example of hit, the function may be to obtain attention. Another form of hitting may be to escape an activity, and yet another form of hitting may be to indicate they need to get rid of a headache. We have to obtain attention. If you look at that function, we have 3 different forms. Cry would be to obtain attention. To grab a toy may be to obtain attention. Call names would be another example of how to obtain attention. Therefore, there is no correct intervention or strategy for the behavior of hitting, and there is no one behavior for gaining attention or avoiding work. There's different functions, different reasons for different interventions.
I'm sure you've had this happen to you before. Someone starts speaking to you about a child's behavior, and they say something like, "It just happened out of the blue." Well, now that you've had our training, you know better. All behavior serves a function.
That's right, Julie. And always remember, behavior is communication. Famous 3 words never rang truer. People engage in behaviors to communicate what they want or what they need or what they don't want. Our goal is to figure out the function of the behavior or what they are trying to communicate, and then teach more socially appropriate ways for them to get what they want or need.
I want you to look at this short video. Try to determine what is the function of this toddler's behavior. Take a look.
Okay, so attention. What was happening in that video prior to? That was really cute. You could definitely see that the mother and the dog were walking away from the baby, and each time they did, the baby would stop crying, and of course, the minute the baby saw his mama, he'd start crying again. So we definitely see that the baby was trying to gain his mama's attention. So the 2 forms. People engage in behaviors to both gain attention from adults or peers or to avoid attention from adults and peers.
Take a look at this video of these twins. What is the function of their behavior?
So people engage in behaviors to both obtain and avoid activities such as work and items such as food. As illustrated with the previous video clip of the twins, both wanted access to the pacifier.
This comic makes me laugh. The original movie's on demand. Talk about getting and obtaining. The toddler's throwing a tantrum trying to get the mom to play the video. Makes you wonder what the mom's going to do next.
So in this short video, look for the function of the dog's behavior.
Hey Hollis, you like laying next to Maxine? Oh, you look like you're about to either poo-poo or something. Yeah, Max. Oh, you can do it, Hollis. You can do it. Push it out. Max, you're so sweet. Yes, you are. You can do it. Get it out. Oh gosh. No. Whoopsie.
Talk about sensory. What was the dog trying to do? He was clearly trying to avoid sensory input. I think on this one it would be the noise and the smell. People also try to gain sensory input. This is when a person is trying to get some kind of pleasurable stimulation, such as pressure or oral stimulation. Think about students that keep putting things into their mouths. They might also be trying to avoid sensory. This is when a person is trying to avoid some kind of sensory input, such as bright lights or loud noises.
So what do we do now? Well, once we determine a pattern in the function of the problem behavior based on data, of course, we then need to choose a replacement behavior to teach the student what to do instead. This replacement behavior should meet or serve the same function as the problem behavior.
So what do we do next? You have to choose strategies that staff can use to promote the student's use of a replacement behavior. For example, if a student engages in physical aggression in order to avoid those unwanted tasks, staff might present the student with a break card and teach them to request a break appropriately. It's important to choose positive reinforcers to motivate the student's use of these replacement behaviors. For example, each time the student requests the break, you immediately provide them with the break.
That's right. So in antecedent interventions, we can use them to change behavior before it even occurs by being proactive and preventative.
Antecedent interventions are used to prevent problem behaviors from ever occurring. We can use things like antecedent exercise. This provides systematic exercise to prevent those problem behaviors. Some teachers use things like Go Noodle or yoga to help their students to get out the wiggles before they engage in long stretches of instructional activities.
Antecedent interventions, demand fading, is very important for the compliance and work one step at a time. It's very important to take away the demand at first very gradually. Reintroduce it very gradually and ask and reintroduce in small steps or chunks to get that compliance. We need to be very careful not to rush this process, though. I always say baby steps. Changing behavior does take time.
We can also provide our students with instructional modifications. This is where we might embed demands within reinforcing activities, like a student that loves technology. We can provide assistance. We help to increase predictability. This might be an intervention like priming. We provide them with choices. Do you want to write with a pencil or a marker? Provide breaks on a time-based schedule. Then that student that's teaching breaks through problem behaviors might stop engaging in those problem behaviors knowing that break is coming. Look down below. There's some instructional modifications that are used in the classroom regularly. We have a visual number line, timers, calculators, and maybe even alphabet charts for those younger students.
So in behavior interventions, you want to teach what you want to see. Here are some behavior intervention visual tools that can be used to teach these new behaviors. For example, if a student's function is to avoid work, we could teach the student to provide us with a break card that allows he or she to get out of work for an X amount of time. This definitely serves the same purpose of the function to avoid work, but in a more appropriate way. You also see a social behavior map that teaches the student expected behaviors and versus unexpected. You could use chill zone procedures to pre-teach the student what they can do when they're feeling upset and need a break. And I really like the one on the outside there, so the student can express what they need, how they feel in a more appropriate way. I feel tired, I feel sick, or I need a break. They can point to you and tell you what they need. Very good behavior interventions.
Again, in those behavior interventions, we have to teach students what it is that we want to see. How many of you have used this phrase with a student? Please use voice level number 3. What if a student doesn't really know what that looks and sounds like? Down below is a voice level chart that can be used in the classroom. You can also see steps to calm down. How many of you have been told to calm down? What if you don't really know what that looks like? There's a 1, 2, 3 turtle social narrative, or T-charts are a great tool is down in the right-hand side down below. This T-chart teaches what's appropriate and not appropriate when we're learning at school.
Consequence interventions are how we respond to either the problem behavior or the appropriate replacement behavior after the behavior has occurred. Remember, consequence is always after the behavior. For example, if the student is demonstrating escalating behavior, we would teach the student to use the chill zone. And we would also use, as Julie explained previously, the procedures on how to calm down. The iPad puzzle is a great way for a student to earn puzzle pieces to a preferred activity for responding appropriately.
Other consequence interventions include my favorite, edibles. You might use a snack as documented in the BIP. What about a first then board? Pairing that non-preferred activity with the preferred activity, or using the Premack principle or grandmother's rule. Some classroom teachers use good job tickets or choice boards so that students know what their choices are when they earn choice time. Have you ever thought about using the administration or the counselor's office as a positive reinforcement or consequence for behavior? What if instead of a negative trip to the principal's office, the child earned a positive trip there, maybe playing a game of Uno with the principal?
If you would like to see more helpful visuals, please visit our Behavior Resources website on Launchpad or take a picture of the link provided. Here you can select and download items of your preference. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you have enjoyed our presentations on the ABCs of behavior.